Hey guys, so we did some interviews, a set of interviews a while back. We kind of held on to them for a minute because of the news that we're about to share with you, but we wanted to do a video publicly, on our social media accounts, letting you know what happened and what transpired. So
The videos that you're about to see with Lunch Break and Doug Brignole, the story about his life, and then Muscle Matters with Doug Brignole, were filmed on October 10th, and Doug passed away on October 13th, found by his maid that morning. The medical examiner's coroner report said it was from COVID-19 infection. So we just wanted to let you guys know that before you watch the video that there was some things that happened. It's the first time it's ever happened to us because we've been on the air for 3 seasons, so that's almost 3 years, and there's always the first. So we wanted to bring that to the audience before that.
Hope you enjoy the interviews.
Hey, welcome to Muscle Matters. I'm sitting here with my friend and co-host, Steve Suthers. Steve, glad to have you there again. If you need any nutritional advice or products, talk to Steve over at Sportslanders West. Love what he does. But we also have with us today, Steve, what I would call an expert in the fitness industry, 43 years of lab ratting and very educational, very knowledgeable individual, Doug Brignole, 43 years in the industry, former Mr. California, America, 2-time Mr. Universe, great competitive career, but he also was a gym owner. He has been on fitness shows. He is an author of 2 books, which we're going to get into tonight, and very knowledgeable. There again, he's as he's an older guy like I am, Steve, not young like you. He's come through some things, which I do believe is a credit to his ability, and I think he's a career change expert, and he's changed his career. I can count probably 3 or 4 times in his history. So, Doug, thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you back. You were on lunch break. You did a great job. I mean, there is one thing, Doug, and I asked you a question. Have you found your love for the sport again? And you said not the industry, but for my knowledge and for my learning. But, Doug, I can tell that you have a passion. And I always tell people that passion comes when you have a purpose. And I do believe your purpose is to get knowledge out. I think you do it through your writing. I think you do it through your videos, through your seminars. But as I've talked to you, your purpose always goes back to fitness, the science behind it, and I love to see that passion. So as I've been able to sit down with you, I've told the audience, Steve, that I admired Doug across the pages of the fitness magazines in the 80s. Doug and I competed in 2 different federations. He competes in the NPC, IFBB now, but I was just an NPC guy, an AAU guy at the time. But I got, I think I've told you the story. I got kicked out of the AAU or drug into the NPC. I don't know which term you would want to use. Both are appropriate. But Doug, thank you for coming on and being here. Take us through. I love your Bill Pearl story. There again, the guys that you've named, I got a chance to meet them all after their competitive careers. Chris Dickerson, Lou Ferrigno, and Dennis Tenorino and I were good friends. Last time I saw Dennis, he came to my office here in Bakersfield, and we talked about his ministry and how he carried it about. So I never got to work out with those guys. Of course, I had the knuckleheads on the other side, the old Gold's Gym guys and World Gym guys. I got to know enough about them. So, Doug, welcome to the show, Muscle Matters. You're familiar here. We are going to run some of Doug's content on commercials. So, like to get you guys resources. As Steve's a resource here in town, Doug would be a phenomenal resource if you're interested in the mechanics of fitness. Doug, take us back to that young. I love the story. You went to the gym and you had to wait a year before you could join. Take us back to those days and just touch on it. And I want to get into the books and that stuff.
Well, I was 14 years old and I was embarrassingly skinny, and I wanted to gain weight. And at the time, the general thought process was that exercise is for people who want to lose weight.
Yeah.
It was not for people who want to gain weight. So, but I had a junior high coach who said to me, the only way you're going to gain the right kind of weight, healthy weight, muscle weight, is by lifting weights. So I started with one of those plastic cement-filled barbell sets at home.
We remember those.
In
You
the
don't.
living room. My mom let me put it in the living room. And it came with a little booklet that kind of explained which exercises to do, the typical, bench press, barbell curl, etc. And then later I moved it into what was back then a breakfast room. So I could really attach springs to the wall, and I could do tricep push downs with springs, and my friend gave me a couple of uprights, which I built a wooden platform and attached them to the wooden platform, so I had a squat rack. And I just really explored it, and was always, processing what I liked, what I didn't like, and why I would like something and dislike something else. And then when I was right around that time, 14, after 6 months of doing this, and I was realizing from reading the magazines that, I needed more equipment, I needed cables, I needed a chinning bar, I needed a leg extension machine. I went to the local gym, which was 5 blocks away. It happened to be owned by Bill Pearl. Now, I didn't know who Bill Pearl was at the time. It just said Pasadena Health Club. So I went inside and I spoke to Bill Pearl. I didn't know who he was. And I said to him, can I join here? And he said, well, how old are you? And so I said, I'm 14. He said, well, our age limit is 15. Can you come back next year? So I said, yes. So I came back a year later. Of course, I kept training at home. And at the age of 15, I came in and he said, well, you're old enough to be a member now. So I just need you to pay $185 and you can be a member. And I said, well, I don't have $185 because my mom is low income and I don't have a job. I'm only, 15 years old. So can I work for you in exchange for membership? Can I, scrub floors for you, anything? And he goes, wow, yeah, sure, absolutely. He says, come in every Saturday, clean the showers for me, sweep the parking lot, polish the chrome machines. I'll pay you also, and you'll earn your week's membership in advance. So that's how we started. And I kept doing that for 8 years. But after 1 year of being at Bill Pearl's gym at the age of 16, I was already competing in my first contest, which was the Teenage Mr. Compton. I took second place. Really got me excited. At 19 years old, I won Teenage California and Teenage America. Then I was really excited, and then I kept going. At 22, I won Mr. California. And then right around when I was 23, Bill Pearl sold the gym. So now I didn't know where to go work out, right? So I thought, I'm going to open up my own gym. So my girlfriend's father at the time was an entrepreneur. So he taught me how to make a business plan. He gave me assignments, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and I didn't realize that I was creating a prospectus. So then once I put all these numbers together, then he said, okay, so now I want you to figure out how much of a percentage you can afford to sell to investors in exchange for a return on their investment. So I decided that, and I played with the numbers, 30% ownership for me was good. I sold 70% ownership to the limited partners, which meant they didn't have any control over the decision making, which meant that if I thought they were getting paid too much and I wasn't getting paid enough, I can always just increase my salary along the way. So we opened up and it went great. They were getting about 20% return on their investment annually. We were a huge success. I mean, we had, eventually we had, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 members.
That's crazy, Doug. Back then.
And famous members. I mean, famous people. Dallas Raines, host of the Channel 7 News, weatherman, and the guy from Lee. What is his name from? I can't think of the rock band, but yeah, we had all kinds of. Michael Jordan came in there. I mean, it was great. It was a great run, but then right around the 8th of the 11 years I ran it, other gyms came to town, and they were all chain gyms, which meant they offered bigger facilities, more equipment, more parking, lower membership rates. And I couldn't compete with that. So at the 11th year, I was forced to close, and by that time I was losing money, and I was in debt to the landlord. So I had to relinquish my equipment and my client list and everything else to cover the losses, her losses. So I was very depressed. I mean, I had lost everything. I had lost my savings, trying to keep this place open. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a gym owner the rest of my life. So I got hired by a company called Sports Club LA, who had a big fitness center in West LA. But number one, you get paid pennies. You get paid a third of what the client pays. And number two, it's a real humiliating experience because you're not the gym owner anymore. Your name isn't on the front of the building. You're just a trainer. And it happened to be that I was working right alongside one trainer that I had fired from my gym. So you can imagine he's snickering, thinking, see how things turn around? Now you're no better than me. So I worked there for about 5 years, and then I got enough outside clients who paid me 3 times more money. So I built up a business that was making good money, but I was still frustrated with the fact that honest trainers, knowledgeable trainers, are never going to get rich. That the people who are getting rich are the ones who are making the infomercials, or the publishers of magazines. And the way they're getting rich is by selling false information. So I met a guy who was a banker, and he decided that he wanted to, because I speak Spanish, my parents are from South America, he needed a partner. I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. I was free to travel. He said, would you be willing to go to Nicaragua to live there and do the exporting part of mahogany, and I'll do the importing part of the mahogany, and then the drying of the lumber and the selling to this company that I've got, who's committed to buying our lumber. So I said, yeah. So I did that for 2 years. I moved to Nicaragua. I lived there, worked fully in Spanish for 2 years. And then finally, my partner said, let's just pull the plug because we're not making enough money. And there's a lot of reasons for that, mostly because it was unrealistic to begin with that we could get enough lumber from there. And also because, it's a corrupt government. It's a third world government. And so you can never, you literally would pay for lumber and it would get confiscated. And they would accuse you of falsifying your documents, and they would take your lumber and auction it off, and there goes your down payment. So it was a terrible situation. So I came back after 2 years to California, restarted my personal training business from scratch because I'd given all my clients away, and I built it back up again. But more importantly, I also had time while I was living in Nicaragua to sort of clear my head and realize that there's room in the market for a truth teller.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing articles for Iron Man magazine. John Balick loved them. I wrote more articles. I got great feedback. So I thought I'm going to write a book. So I wrote this book called The Physics of Resistance Exercise. And my publisher tells me he has sold more of those books than any other book that he's published. He's more proud of my book than any other. So it's endorsed by 10 PhDs and 3 orthopedic surgeons. But it's very unconventional. That's what makes it good.
It is.
It reveals the physics, the mechanics of exercises that once you see it, once you know it, you wonder how the hell you ever weren't informed of this before.
There again, I tell this story because I saw you, Doug, and I don't know if you remember it, and I don't know where I saw it. It might have, it was on one of your sites, and it was doing squats with the cables, but kind of leaning backwards at an angle. And I'm like, holy smokes, I could see how that's going to work. And I tried it and I go, I can squat again. I had activation. I've told Steve this. I had activation of my quads again. And at that time I hadn't done any stem cell. So I was able to lift and get stimulation through your technology of body mechanics, through the cables and just getting that angle right and going from there. So I love that, Doug. I'm a product of your theory. Your theory is proven.
Well, it's physics, right? It's quantifiable.
Yep.
Right? It has so much to do with the direction of the resistance relative to the limb that's being operated by your target muscle. So if you're doing a regular squat and the direction of resistance is straight down and your lower leg is tilting at 30 degrees, then you have that angle of resistance. But if you change the direction of resistance to a cable, look how perpendicular that is. The more perpendicular the angle of resistance is to the operating lever, the higher the percentage of the load you're getting, which means you don't have to use as much weight
Yes.
to get the same amount or more resistance.
Which, Doug, do you find that there again? I know you're younger than I am. I'll keep touting that. I think by 2 years. Do you find that that's more important for older guys? And I don't know your client base, but a lot of us older guys, Steve not in that camp yet because he still has some good weights. We want to stimulate our tissue, but there's just so much that even, of course, we were doing it incorrectly anyways. And when you were doing it incorrectly, that's where most of our injuries came from. But when you're doing it correctly, like you said, you can lessen the load and get the stimulation. And that's what I've learned the older I get, is I'm looking for that stimulation. And when I was able to do it the way you had described it on your video, it was bing bada boom. It was there.
Well, let me just say this, that these techniques would work better for young people as well.
Yes.
They're just better mechanics, period. You can get away with more abuse when you're younger.
Yes, you can.
And when you're younger, you care more about being known as a beast.
That's this
Right?
guy here.
So the more weight you lift, the more you like being known as a beast. Right? So that's one of the big problems in weight training, is the assumption, the false assumption, that the more weight you lift, the more muscle load you get. And of course, if you lift a weight that's twice as heavy in an exercise that is a lighter weight, but it's the same exercise, the same mechanics, yes, you are getting more load, but you're still getting the same reduced percentage of the load. So the problem that most guys have is you tell them, do it this way, they go, well, I can't use as much weight. So therefore, I must not be getting as much load.
Yeah.
I said, let me give you an example of how you are. You can get a 1,200-pound quadricep load with a body weight sissy squat that allows your lower leg to get horizontal and you weigh 200 pounds. But you'll only get a 950-pound quadricep load if you're a 200-pound guy and you have 200 pounds on your back. And it's all having to do with the angle of that lower leg. It's quantifiable. It's physics. It's engineering.
It's smart.
Yeah.
I mean,
Why beat up your skeleton?
just listen to what you, like I said, I watched some of your things and I was really interested. And 10 years ago, I'd have called it sacrilegious. Like you said, 10, 20
Right.
years ago, it would have been sacrilegious because what do you mean? And I was laughing when you said that. We have this beast mentality. I used to do a superset. I don't know what it did for my actual bodybuilding, but it was a deadlift, row, and a pull-up. But I could do it, and I knew about maybe 2% of the people in the world could do that particular superset. So I felt great doing it. But did it really do much? No. But like you said, I like the fact that you talked about the biochemistry and all that good stuff. And I tell people all the time, it's geometry. It's really geometry. Weightlifting is geometry. It's a line, you figure it out, and you learn how to target the muscle. And everything you're saying is just perfect, because like you said, Tom, I love to be able to bend the bar. My back won't let it happen anymore. I had to figure different ways to still get the stimulation, but do it in a smarter way. And that's exactly what your system is. Your system is doing it in a smarter way. Yes.
Once you understand the physics, and you open your mind a little bit to allow yourself to see it, then you realize there's no doubt about it. Like if you're doing parallel bar dips for your triceps, and you know that your forearm being vertical is neutral, so your tricep, which is the muscle that operates that forearm lever, is not loaded at all when you're in the up position. And then you dip down and that forearm tips back about 10 degrees. 10 degrees is far from horizontal. It's far from even a 45-degree angle. You're only getting about 10% of your body weight on your triceps. But if you laid on your back and did skull crushers with 20-pound dumbbells, you get twice the load as you would with a body weight dip. But they say, well, that's impossible because dips are much harder. Well, they're much harder for a number of reasons. I mean, even just being in the up position when no muscle is loaded is hard, holding yourself there. But if you understand the way physics, geometry works, you realize a horizontal lever, a lever that's perpendicular to resistance, gives you 100% of the available resistance to that muscle.
And let's face it, bodybuilding, it's the side thing for bodybuilders is to be strong. It's not the goal. Our goal is to build muscle. I mean, I'm looking at your legs. Those things look fantastic. I want to make sure everybody sees how great those legs look in that picture right there.
I've already told this to Doug, and you've heard me say it before. I'm not a super. I don't hold on to the past, but I was the underachieving Mr. California. That was a much there's a lot of reasons for that, but Doug was a fantastic representative of not only the title but the knowledge that goes along with the title. I mean, I think that's precious.
Well, those legs speak for themselves.
Oh yeah, those calves.
Yes.
And then you take the second thing or the third thing. Doug's doing and looking the way he is, in his 60s, and that's
in a garage gym.
In a garage gym. I meant to bring
with
that up.
No power rack or barbells.
But I do want to say this because I told our lunch break audience, and I know our audiences don't mix sometimes, but on Muscle Matters. I told Doug that when was the West Coast Classic that you won the overall in? Was that
1991?
Which was the one that I came down and watched you in? Because it was in 2000, Lonnie Teeper's show.
That was 2010.
Yeah, I knew Doug was competing, and the only reason I went was to see Doug, and because I was inspired. Because I knew Doug's age and he was in such fantastic shape, I'm like, I need to really learn from people who are close to my age. But one of the things that really inspired me about Doug was his passion for what he was doing, and I do believe that purpose is in the love of the physiology or the geometry that you're talking about. That affects the growth of our muscles, because I wanted to get inspired, and Doug provided that inspiration for me to attack. And there again, I mean, I don't think I'm ever going to get to the level that I can aspire to, or even look like Doug does nowadays. But I feel much better than I did, and I feel more. I don't think I'm quantified, but I feel that I'm achieving more now in fitness because Doug was there providing a way and
reigniting the fire.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I told him that when I was there. Lonnie Teeper's like, "Oh, thanks for coming down to see my show." I go, "I came down to see Doug." I think you were backstage when I told Lonnie that. I go, "Only reason I'm here, Lonnie, is because I want to see Doug." The only reason I made that trip there. But I'm just saying. Yeah. But I'm saying, Doug, you do inspire others, and I love the fact that as Steve's watching it, of course, he's noticing what you've achieved, because I do think there is merit on what you can achieve. I do think there's credibility, like you said. The one guy that brought your book on after you wrote it, and he says, the PhD. I think he said, hey, one of the 3 reasons was because you were Mr. California, Mr. America, a 2-time Mr. Universe. There is, I think, a qualification in that, and that's something we haven't even touched yet, Doug. And I tell people that I was a steroid addict because I was. I ran in a group that the needle wasn't enough. Whatever it took, we did, and it created a issue with me. I didn't tell you, Doug, but I ended up with stage 4 liver disease, but I'm down to stage 2. Steve knows that. But I'm just saying, we did everything. And I think that's misleading. And I think what you're sometimes referring to, Doug, is when you watch these influencers, and Doug's been in the industry. You have too, Steve. We all know that photographs are taken 2 weeks before a show, 2 weeks after a show. You get all your publicity. And like Doug said, we used to bulk up. And we weren't obviously in bodybuilding condition, but no one ever touches on the drugs, not only the anabolics, but growth hormone and that kind of thing. And I think that's a misleading indicator on really what works or doesn't work, because that's something, Doug, that I don't see people being honest with. I know you and I talk about our past, but it's just one of those things where, I was proud of my 87 America appearance where I placed 11th at a tough class and only used GH. I was like, yay, good for me. You know, I wasn't drug free, but I was at least anabolic free. But I think some of the influencers will show us, hey, you can eat liver. I think I'm referring to the one guy. It looked like this. No, you can't. You cannot. What do you think when you see those kind of commercials?
You know, look, I mean, the average American, the average bodybuilding diet is not heart healthy to begin with.
No.
The average American diet is a low fat, high carb diet. High protein, yes, but also high carb, low fat. And that causes you to produce more cholesterol than you otherwise would. So you combine that with anabolics, and now you've got a real problem.
Yes.
Right, and a lot of the people that were taking the anabolics, they're not getting blood tests. They're not looking at their cholesterol, LDL, VLDL, triglycerides, insulin, etc. But if they were, and they noticed they were high, they would then also have to know what dietary changes can I make to make that better. And if they don't know biochemistry, they're not going to be able to make those changes.
You know, and it's you and I, Doug, competed, and people were interested in us because there again, I was a weeder athlete as a young age. Joe made sure my blood was checked. My they owned a piece of me, so they made sure I was okay, and I still wasn't okay. You know, I still ended up with stage 4 kidney disease, you know, after all the abuse I went through or put myself through. I don't blame anybody. I mean, that wasn't his fault. I mean, I was just a visual product of what he wanted to portray in the magazines. I was a commodity. I was a piece of meat, really, is basically right. What I was. And when I figured that out, it was a whole different story for my psyche that I got there.
Well, I mean, Joe Weider used to, not only write articles or have articles written that were misleading.
Oh, lies.
But he used to sell
Doug, they weren't just misleading. They were lies.
You get a pound of muscle in a week.
Yeah, they're lies.
I remember I told you, I think my first diet was based on something I read out of a magazine, and it was, cans of tuna is just not the way to go.
It just, Doug, that's what bothers me. It's just out lies. And that's why I'm glad you're going back and taking that honest approach with your video with your website and with your thought process. Doug, talk to us a little bit about nutrition, and maybe Steve can jump in on this too.
No, I was, honestly, I was listening to his podcast, one of the podcasts you had, and I thought it was very interesting, especially the counter way that you ate more fats to counter your cholesterol. I thought that was.
Yeah, why don't you go back into that, because you really explained it well, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, it is obvious. I mean, you can prove it in 3 months that when you increase your dietary fat and you decrease your starches, your high glycemic carbohydrates, you will have a lower level of cholesterol than you would if you ate low fat, high carbs. I mean, you can do this yourself. I mean, I encourage everyone to go get a blood test. If you're eating high carbs, low fat now, get a blood test. Look at your cholesterol level, and then switch over to a high fat, low carb diet, and then check your cholesterol, and you'll be surprised that your cholesterol will be lower because you're producing much less cholesterol.
Doug, because you're saying that most of the stuff we're doing is our body is creating the cholesterol. We're not consuming it, the body's creating it.
And is it creating it for a lack? Because we're lacking
what's
something.
What's shocking to me is that, we trusted, and some people still do trust, the American Heart Association. When I went to my cardiologist, his tech people said, be sure you eat low fat. I mean, these are the people that you trust, and they don't know.
Do you think, Doug, I mean, and there again, as we're touching the medical profession, because we do trust them, that they're more interested on the medicine side than on the nutritional side, and we only they only get involved with this when we're severely, damaged with our cholesterol level, or we need a stent or something like that.
Well, that would be sinister. The thought that they actually know they're giving you bad advice, because they want you to keep coming in so they can solve your problems with medication or surgery. And if they give you the correct advice, you won't come in and they won't have anything to do. That's pretty sinister. I don't think that's actually happening. I think what's actually happening is they were taught false information in their early years, This was the conventional wisdom, and they're too busy or too unmotivated to find and keep up with the latest research.
Doug, when you go out there and you speak, because I know you have a guest appearance, and you look fabulous in a few weeks, 4 weeks, I think it is, and
2 weeks.
What is the audience reaction to what you're saying? Because there again, like Steve said, 10 years ago when he was that beast, he would think, oh, this is sacrilegious. Is the audience more open to it nowadays? Like, oh yeah, we're tracking with you, or are they still hesitant? Like, there again, we haven't even touched the iceberg with the state of bodybuilding the way it is now. I'm just like, what the heck? But what's their attitude towards your information?
Well, it's all over the map, right? So you'll get some people that are very dogmatic, and they listen to the majority of social media, which still preaches old school stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they think I'm crazy, right? Then there's some people who are more open-minded and more logically minded rather than emotionally attached, and they're more open to it. And then there's other people who are bizarrely always looking for what's new. And so I could be saying something that's wrong, but because it's new, they'll be embracing it. So I don't want anyone embracing it for the fact that it's new. I want people to open their minds and process the information and realize how this process works and that it makes more logical sense.
Well, you've actually put it in writing. I mean, you've actually taken your knowledge, written a book, it's been published, and people are consuming it. And you have experts that are saying, this is revolutionary stuff.
Yeah, it's endorsed by 10 PhDs and 3 orthopedic surgeons. And if you go to the Amazon website, you'll see hundreds of reviews of people saying, this is the most amazing book I've ever read on bodybuilding. I wish this book had been around 30 years ago. I would have wasted much less time.
Yep.
So yes, it's being well embraced, but there's still very, very dogmatic people out there, which is part of the reason why I decided to do this exhibition on the 22nd, was because I want people to see the kind of physique that you can develop in a garage gym doing none of the big three, doing isolation exercises only, because when a muscle is working, it doesn't know whether it's working during an isolation exercise or during a compound exercise as a participant. It only knows it has a job to do. Let's say if you're a quadricep, you know that your job is to extend the knees. So if you're doing a squat, your job is to participate in that component only. And the benefit you get as a quadricep will only relate to how challenging the knee extension component of that exercise is. It won't relate to what the glute is doing or the erector spinae are doing, right? So it doesn't make any sense to try to work 3 muscles at the same time, especially if one of those muscles is the weak link in the chain, which compromises the other 2. You're better off doing an isolation exercise. By the way, there's a thing called reciprocal inhibition, which means that 2 opposing muscles can't activate at the same time. When you're doing curls, you may be unaware of it, but your tricep is shutting off because your central nervous system doesn't want interference with the biceps activity. That's fine, you don't pay attention to it when you're doing curls. But when you're doing squats, your activation of the glutes, which is a hip extensor, shuts off hip flexors. You have 5 hip flexors, one of which is rectus femoris. 25% of your quadricep is shutting off when you're squatting.
That's crazy.
So you're having to use a weight that's 3 times heavier than you'd have to use in order to get the same amount of load on your quadricep with an isolated exercise. And you're also getting a deactivation of your rectus femoris. It just makes no sense.
Well, it's not really crazy, because if you look at a power lifter who can squat 1,000 pounds, and then you look at the bodybuilder who might squat 225, the difference in leg shape and size is just phenomenal. It's night and day. Here you got a guy that can go outside and pick up a Volkswagen, and then you got the other guy.
Or those rocks at the gym.
Yes, yeah.
I saw those rocks at the gym, and I was like, how do you pick up those rocks? And he can pick up the rocks.
So like everything you're saying, I mean, if you open your mind, you realize it's the truth, because like I said, you can see a power lifter who can pick up the world, And then you see the bodybuilder who's doing a quarter of that, and people look out the corner of their eye like, oh, he's not a very strong person, but that's not his goal. Like you said, the goal is to work the muscle.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I remember when I was a kid, 18, 19 years old, and people could see that I had some muscle size, and they would say, how much you bench?
Yeah.
And even then, I would think, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, why would you care about one exercise? Why don't you ask me how much I can leg curl or calf raise, right? You're only talking about one exercise that involves pecs and triceps and maybe a little bit of front deltoid. And first of all, why is that an indicator of strength? That's number one. But number two is instead of bragging about how much weight you can lift, not realizing that part of the reason you can lift a lot is because you're incorporating mechanics that allows you to do that. You should be bragging about how much muscle load you were actually able to get with a little weight it took to do it, because you use better physics.
I love
But people don't focus on that because they're all in beast mode mentality, they're all in macho mentality, and they all think that, and they don't think, they know, that they will be more respected if they announce that they're doing a 1,000-pound leg press. That's the way the world, social media is one of the worst things that's happened to bodybuilding, because everyone wants to be a hero on social media, and they want to do a 1,000-pound leg press, even if it's only like 5 degrees range of motion. It's ridiculous. When I do my YouTube shows, I say, frankly, I don't care if you subscribe. My goal here is not to get a big audience. I don't care if you leave a comment or not. I'm not here for compliments, and I'm not here for criticism. I'm going to give you information, do with it whatever you want.
I love that.
I love what he's saying, because even when in my heyday, I used to have more training partners that hated training with me because I would save that compound movement as the cherry on top of my sundae. That was the end of my workout, when I'd spent all that time being a bodybuilder, training the muscle. I wanted to be bigger. The strength was just a side effect of what I was trying to do. And at the very end, I would do my ego lift. Okay, cool. I've did my bodybuilding for the last hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pick something up, because it's just my ego lift now, because that's essentially all it is.
Yeah, listen, let me just tell you, a muscle does not get stronger with a power lift than it does with an isolation lift. Why? Because a muscle gets stronger based on the degree of challenge. So if you're doing, let's say, a flat dumbbell tricep extension or a one-arm tricep extension, and you're pushing as heavy a weight as you can for 4 or 5 reps, you're building the strength of that tricep as well as you would be by doing, let's say, a bench press, a heavy bench press. The tricep doesn't know what you're actually doing and how much weight you're actually using. It only knows how much load it's getting and how hard it's having to work. So the idea that I do power lifts in order to gain strength and I do isolation lifts in order to gain muscle, that's ridiculous. A muscle doesn't know the difference. Challenge makes a muscle bigger and stronger.
What is the universal saying? Time under tension?
Yes. Hey, Doug, I love your knowledge, and so I wanted to spend a couple moments just to get your thought. Now I'm looking for an opinion. Do you remember when we first walked in the gym? I did in 1976 and 77, and there was no women in the gym. It was actually a formidable atmosphere. I remember when I walked into the second location of Gold's Gym, the first person I ran into was Robbie Robinson. Man, I was so fortunate because he was such a nice human being, such an good guy. And he's like, Tom, if I can help you with anything, let me know. I know. And there again, I'm like you. I didn't know these guys from anyone. They're just like a bunch of guys. I didn't know what titles were. Yeah. But I remember when women came. I remember when Rachel McLeish started competing, of course, winning the first Miss Olympia. Then I remember getting a question in Flex magazine. They always had the little section, what do I think about women bodybuilding? And I was honest. I still have the edition because it was a marketable time in my life. I was honest. I said, well, I appreciate what they do because I do it, but I'm not sure I like the results that I'm seeing. Because there was, nowadays, we all know that on a woman, a bigger, rounder muscle is more appealing. I mean, it just is. And but I remember saying that, and I got a lot of interesting mail, that was just like, so you don't like the way we look? I go, I didn't say that. You don't want to date us because we don't want to date you. I was like, well, I didn't say that either. I just said I appreciate the effort, but I'm not sure I'm into the result. That was, gosh, and 80, probably 83 through 87.
They're being defensive about it, right? So,
what did you think about women?
I can understand. Well, look, women's bodybuilding has had a long history of conflicts. Okay, when Rachel McLish was winning, everyone loved her. Then along came Bev Francis. Yeah. Bev Francis was arguably more muscular. Theoretically, she should have won, but she didn't.
Yep.
They gave it to Rachel McLish. And the judges explained that it was because Rachel McLish combined femininity with muscle development. And I thought, well, if this is a muscle contest, it should only be about muscle and leanness. So, but I agree with you. I've never liked the aesthetic of women bodybuilding. Now, there have been some, like Corey Everson is a great example of someone who was able to get a lot of muscle and still look feminine. And so she was able to win contests even though she had a lot of size. Iris Kyle is incredibly muscular. When I saw her in person, the only thing I could think of is, I wish I looked like that.
Well, it's funny because they would be winning the heavyweight division of a lot of...
Right? I mean, their quads and deltoids are amazing. Their back, their lats. I mean, so yes, I am in the same camp as you. I am impressed with your sacrifice and your muscle development, but it's not something I find aesthetically appealing. Now, they could easily say, and they often do, I'm not doing it to be aesthetically appealing to people that don't like it. Okay. Yeah. Everyone, there's cross-dressers, there's all kinds of people that do things that they know are not unanimously popular. Yep. But they do it because they like it, and there's a certain group of people that also like it, and so...
So let me ask you another question. I don't want to get you in trouble because I'm not in the industry anymore, so it doesn't matter. But what do you think about the state of men's open physique?
Well, look, I mean, we used to love the 80s.
Yeah, you and I were a
70s,
product
80s,
of that.
90s competitors. I mean, if you saw a silhouette of Boyer Coe, Frank Zane, Robbie Robinson, you would know who it was by their silhouette, right? The physiques were very, very different. They all have their own kind of aesthetics. But if you look at the Mr. Olympias today, they don't look that different. They're just all balloon-shaped, right? So, and look, I think it's a natural progression. In other words, I think you can't, if you're a competitive bodybuilder, you can't improve your aesthetics because that requires a genetic component. But you can increase your size no matter what. So you do whatever you can do to get the edge. So the bigger the better. And look, we've all seen like a Dorian Yates stand next to someone like a Frank Zane, and it's just overwhelming. You can't deny the bigger size. And so by default, the judging went in favor of the mass.
Yep. 81 Olympia, Mike or Arnold?
Mike Menser, you mean? I have to say, I never liked his physique.
Yeah, it was.
I never liked his aesthetics. When they said, he's the only one who ever got a perfect score in the universe, I thought, score? I didn't know they used scores. I mean, usually when we judge contests, it's like, who do you think is first? Who do you think is last? Who do you think is second best? Who do you think is second worst? I mean, that's, a score.
Yeah, it's.
I thought his physique his hips were wide, his pecs were flat. His arms his triceps were weird. His adductors were too big. His calves were big, but not necessarily aesthetic. So I never liked his physique. I would have definitely voted for Arnold then over. In fact, I wouldn't have said it was between those two.
Yes,
I would have said it was, second place or third place would have been, maybe Boyer Coe or maybe Frank Zane or one of the other guys.
I tell people, and during, I think it was 86, 87, Joe had me kind of representing bodybuilding to the IOC, International Olympic Committee. And I remember talking to some of the representatives because we were trying to get into the World's Game to actually get into the Olympics. I mean, that was a hope, I think, of Ben Weider more than Joe. And I remember talking to, I think it was one of the Asian representatives, and I took him around L.A. and introduced him to Muscle Beach and Gold's Gym and Worlds, and it was a mecca back then still. And I remember them getting down, and we had a few meetings, and we had a final lunch. And I just said, hey, I don't know what else to say. You have any questions you want to ask me? And they go, yeah. Tom, we got two questions. One is, why is the winner always booed? And I go, because it's a subjective, politicized sport. And I go, that's why there's 7 judges. They go, everything you've shown us, the winner gets booed. It's hard to explain to the audience why the winner gets booed. And then I was like, well, it's a highly subjective sport. We recognize that. We've all fell the victim of it, right, guys? Yeah. We've all fell the victim of it. And then they said, so divers make a big splash so we can take points away. Hurlers knock a hurdle over. They go, do bodybuilders do anything that would take points away? And I go, what do you mean? They go, well, do they ever explode? And I go, no. They're like, we're looking for something quantitative that we can say, bam, gold medal winner, undisputed, And I go, no, we are more like diving. I go, you're going to show up a little sign and people are going to question, was that a 10 or was that an 8? It's like, I go, that's always going to happen. And they didn't let us in the...
Look, for one thing, I think the main reason why bodybuilding was never allowed into the Olympics is because the presentation on the stage is not an athletic event.
No, it's
right, like figure skating or gymnastics. You work and then you execute an athletic move perfectly or not.
Yep.
When you're doing, a front double bicep, no one cares if you're doing it right. It's about your development.
Yeah.
And so the sport happened in the gym, but we're not looking at you in the gym.
Yeah.
So it's really just a beauty contest. It's not.
Well, it was the impact. They let us into the World Games for a couple of years, and then they said, no, you're never getting in the Olympics. and it's funny because I kept telling the guys at Weider headquarters, I think Rick Wayne was still there and the guys, and I was like, they're not letting us in. I go, they're not convinced. I guarantee you they're not convinced.
That's very interesting how you said that and it's just because how do you pick left from right?
Yeah,
and it's the truth.
They were really concerned because they were really concerned about that whole aspect of it, the subjectiveness of the vote.
Well, no one crosses the finish line first.
Yeah, and they kept asking me questions. I go, guys, I've shown you everything in our sport, and it's subjective, and they've seen the score sheets, they've seen it all, they've talked to judges, and I was like, it's the way it is, and people will get booed. It's gonna happen. And I go, our fans are passionate, and they have their favorites, and in their eyes, their favorites are the favorites. No one can be better than their favorite, unfortunately.
Well, and it's also probably because the person who wins is not necessarily the one that would be generally considered the best. It's the person who played their cards right.
Yeah, there again, I'll never forget my first friend that criticized me, and it was Phil Williams. And it was after the 85 Nationals. It was disastrous for me. And I remember Joe called me and said, and I just said, Joe, you had me all over the country. How can I compete and at that level? And Phil really kind of said what he thought about me in the magazines, and I was like, "What the heck?" But there again, I mean, I had a bad showing. I came back the next year, placed, runner up to JJ, and he went on the overall to USA, and and that's history.
Well, it doesn't really matter what the opinion of a competitor has of you. It has to do with the opinion of the judges and if you've paid the price.
Yep. Yeah, it's the whole.
That's where it's gone now, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. So, Steve, you have any questions of our Doug? I mean,
no, I'm good. I'm being able to sit back and absorb.
Oh, me too.
So if people out there are like, this big mouth has got his mouth shut today, because I'm absorbing. You don't speak when you're in the midst of knowledge. If your mouth is moving, your ears can't be open, and you can't learn.
Well, I hope this is what the audience is getting, because we're going to bring you some guys like Doug, who we got to get the word out. There again, we'll put up the books he's wrote, $1 Million Muscle, and I like in your $1 Million Muscle, you talk about how fitness has from the very beginning exploited itself on the financial side. And I love that point that you brought out there. And then I love the fact that when you wrote the book with Physics of Resistance Exercise, it talks about the idea, like you said, that the popular influencers aren't even doing the exercises right. The people that are recommending nutritional supplement, sometimes don't know what they're talking about, and then we put all the American Heart Association recommended diet isn't even what we should be following as we get older, and we have calcium deposits in our arteries because whatever we've done, whether we didn't do enough pushbacks from the dinner table or whatever that was in our younger years.
You mean the buffets after the workout?
Oh yeah. We haven't even touched it. Doug, you've been
$1 Million Muscle is a sociology book.
Uh-huh.
It's a university sociology book that I co-authored with Adrian Tan, who's a sociology professor, PhD. And so he invited me to co-author it because he wanted to examine the fitness industry from a sociological standpoint, from a behavior standpoint. And he was not as knowledgeable about the industry as I was, so he was talking about it from the outside in, and I would be talking about it from the inside out. And it made for a great combination, but we talked about all kinds of stigmas and false beliefs and false advertising and commercialization. And the only thing is, I just want to make clear that it's not a how-to book.
I agree.
It does not teach you how to work out. It just examines the industry. The Physics of Resistance Exercise is a how-to book. It explains how to choose the best exercise and why that's a better exercise than this one.
Well, Doug, tell us how to get a hold of you. Tell our audience how to get a hold of you. We're gonna publicize it.
We can go to my website, dougbrignole.com, and you can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on Facebook, and you can go to Amazon to get the book. And then we've got some great courses. My friend Mo Larby and I on Smart Training 365. There we've got some videos that explain the Brig 20, which are the 20 best exercises, and their second, third best alternatives. And also, some periodization programs, 4 periodization programs, and you can rotate. And then we also have a trainer certification. It's called the Physics of Fitness. So you can actually, if you don't like reading, and so many people don't, you can just get this online course, and you can be quizzed, and you can take a final exam, and you can be biomechanics certified.
I love that, Doug. Thank you for continuing on in your journey of fitness.
I want to say something really quick. Audience out there, if you missed the very beginning where he explained how he figured out his gym. Every meathead wants to own a gym. If no other reason than that, every meathead out there that wants to own a gym needs to pick your brain so they can figure out how to go about actually opening their own gym. You can't get a winning lottery ticket and go, oh, ta-da, they don't last. Valid information.
Not only how to finance a gym, but also, how to equip it. And frankly, if you're a trainer and you don't understand biomechanics, you're making a big mistake. You really are. I mean, you might think that old school is popular and it's worked for you, but you don't know what would work better with less effort until you understand this stuff.
I love it. Doug, thank you for spending your time with us, educating us, and our audience. Steve, thank you. You're always a blessing to have around. Want to thank MLH Productions, 511 Media Group, Alex and Mike and Nathaniel and the group. My daughters Tessa and Taylor Touchstone, they're creative consultants. And Doug, man, it's been a pleasure knowing you through the years. I hope to get to know you better.
Thank you.
And you are a blessing, and you are a true role model for the sport. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you,
Nice meeting
Doug.
you, brother.
God bless.
Okay.